Welcome and thank you for coming today. Bryan Forrest Peters, Forrest after his beloved grandfather, was born February 8th, 1969, to Bill and Forrest Peters in the Dalles, Oregon. He grew up in Sherman County, graduated from Sherman County High School. While a student there, he was a member of the Sherman FFA band, lettered in football, basketball, and baseball. He was student body president in 1986, or student body vice president in 1986, and student body president his senior year. He attended Oregon State University and was a member of Alpha Gamma Rho fraternity, where he served as vice president for 2 years. He was also a member of the OSU rugby team. He graduated in 1992 with a degree in agricultural resource economics. After graduation, Bryan moved home to farm with his dad until Bill's passing in 1993. Then he continued to farm with his mother and brother as Peters ranches. He married Heather Williams in 1997, and they had Delaney and Garrett. Bryan loved music, and he would tell you he was a drummer in a rock and roll band. He was very active in the Sherman community. He umpired, refereed, coached, and was the voice of the Huskies on the football team. Served on the weed board and acted in many of the Barnstormer theater plays, all while rarely missing any of his children's events. He was a lifelong Oregon State Beaver fan, and a highlight for him was taking his kids to see the Beavers win the College World Series in Omaha in 2018. He leaves behind 2 children, Delaney Marie, James Garrett, brother Scott and his wife Carrie, their children Calix and Kiera, Aunt Sally Albright, Uncles Nick and Jim Peters, and Mother Forrest. Bryan died at his home on January 31st, and he'll be greatly missed by all who loved him. It's hard to sum up someone like Bryan's life in one written page, so hopefully we can fill in some of those blanks for you today. Although Bryan left us all too soon, he was just short of 52 years. He left a colorful past. He had broad interests. He could talk about anything from sports to politics. He could always turn a phrase when he needed to, or throw in a well-timed barb. One of his favorite targets for his good-natured ribbing was his mother. Today we'll hope to show you some of the facets of Bryan's life and share some memories. And hopefully while you're listening to those, most will be new and some you'll probably remember on your own, but you can think of your own, and hopefully sometime you can share them between yourselves and maybe share them with the family if you get a chance. Like I said, a lot of his stories were pretty colorful, so you might have to do some editing to make it suitable for presentation. So I hope that you can laugh and smile with us today as we remember Bryan. One of the things that Bryan did was he was a coach, and one of his underlings, I guess, that he brought along was with us today to share some of his memories. Justin Miller.
Good morning. It goes without saying, but I wish more than anything we weren't together under these circumstances. Look around at this turnout. It's a showing that Bryan left his mark and meant so much to all of us. Delaney and Garrett, I know you already know this, but your dad loved you like you couldn't imagine. Was so proud of your accomplishments this far in your lives, and know that he'll be looking down and beaming with pride on all your milestones and accomplishments yet to come. I mean, who else would have gotten the biggest OSU Beaver fan I know to root for a team from Washington with purple and gold uniforms? Here was a guy that would watch that team in Seattle and that team from Eugene play against each other, just to then get upset that one of them had to win by default and both couldn't end up with a loss. When Forrest asked me if I'd be willing to speak today, I knew exactly what I would speak about. I knew not everybody would understand the humor, insults, and banter that myself and many others here today would share with Bryan, so that was out. I was told long ago to consider time and place before telling a story. So given it's before noon and we're on school property, I'll stick to that advice, time and place. Bryan typically let you know his political views or which politicians he disagreed with, but I was also told not to bring up politics in public, so again, time and place. What would be safe to talk about? How about his winning streaks playing Name That Tune? Hell, he might have even been undefeated. How about his endless knowledge of sports trivia and statistics, or his 20-plus years announcing football games in that booth right there behind you? As one that played while he announced, he made us kids feel like we were playing in a New Year's Day bowl game. After working in the booth with Scott last night, as he made his debut, I saw firsthand that it's not as easy as you might think it is. As a fan, when Bryan was in the booth, you had to pay attention for the occasional Bob Uecker-like razzing he would give the chain gang, thinking out loud to himself if the officials were watching the same game he was, or giving a shout out to an old friend, classmate, or teammate watching from the sideline that he hadn't seen in a while. I could try to recreate some of his impersonations of both famous people and local legends, but I couldn't do them justice. Well, Lottie frickin' da. How great would it be to see Bryan transform one more time into Chris Farley's Saturday Night Live character, Matt Foley, motivational speaker, and warn us that if we didn't clean our acts up, we'd all end up living in a van down by the river. Maybe somebody would finally confess and we'd find out that million-dollar question of who threw the eggs. As great of memories as those are, I knew I wanted to share with everybody the legend of Coach. In the mid-2000s, Scott Thompson introduced a group of us to a slow-pitch softball tournament in Waitsburg, Washington. The times we shared up there as a ragtag group caring more about the dollar beers being sold between the two fields and making sure we lost our 2 games early enough that we'd be able to watch the Beavers play in the College World Series or something else. One year, Bryan got pinned as our pitcher. I think that year we ended up winning one of our first 2 games and had to play an actual meaningful 3rd game. That was definitely uncharted territory. After listening to Pete convey his desire not to pitch anymore, I told him I would do it. This meant Bryan got to coach. After a couple innings of playing against a team that took the game a little more serious than we did, I ended up walking a guy. Before the guy got to first base, I looked up, and here came Coach. Before he hit the foul line, he asked Blue for time, and here he came for a meeting at the mound and a pep talk. You know that BP walk, sunglasses on, look of displeasure on his face. Coach did a good job holding off on his laughing until he suggested I remove my head from a body cavity it may be stuck in. Then he slapped me on the shoulder and returned to the dugout, laughing at himself all the way. The next inning, he must have retired from coaching after solidifying his spot in the slow-pitch softball Hall of Fame for being the first coach to hold a meeting at the mound. He left his post in the dugout and was conversing with some locals near the other field. As a foul ball went up, nearly everybody yelled, "Heads!" Most everybody at the complex took notice except for 2 guys. Coach and the guy telling him about 100-plus bushel wheat, dryland wheat, grown on the hills surrounding town year in and year out. Wham! Coach took that pop foul right off the noggin. Once we all knew he was okay, the laughs ensued, and "That's our coach" was coined for the first time from someone on the field. Although his nickname was cemented while coaching the Bad News Bears in Waitsburg, there's a group of us that looked up to Bryan as a coach before we called him a friend. As I got older, I appreciated more and more the time, effort, and his personal resources he put into coaching us in grade school football and basketball. He even went as far as agreeing to let us shave his head if we went undefeated in both sports my 8th grade year. Toward the end of that basketball season, Coach found a couple of AAU type tournaments for us to play in and offered to coach us. One of them was in Vancouver and the other in Umatilla. He even agreed ahead of time that any losses in those tournaments didn't count against our undefeated regular season and negate the head shaving deal. I know myself and the guys on that team will never forget our first game in Umatilla. Coach called a timeout with about 2 seconds left in the game, and we were trailing by 2 points. As he told us to sit down, he broke out a whiteboard and said we're going to try a little something he saw in a movie. Anybody have any guesses what that was? The picket fence from the 1986 film Hoosiers. Coach drew it up, somehow we executed it, and Asa hit the 3 for a win at the buzzer, and part of the crowd spilled on the floor to celebrate with us. That lifelong memory for a group of kids wouldn't have been possible without our coach, Bryan Peters, giving up his time as a mid-20-something-year-old that had lost his father just a couple years prior. He went above and beyond in finding us tournaments outside the regular school schedule and giving up his weekends to coach us. He didn't just show up to coach us. If kids needed a ride or place to stay since those tournaments were out of town and their parents weren't able to attend, he'd load them up in his red Isuzu rodeo, get a hotel room, make sure kids got fed, and make arrangements with other parents so the uniforms would get washed for the next day. That is the story I wanted to share with you today, the complete story of the legend of Coach, and the lifelong memories he provided for us through giving us time. By the way, he did follow through and let us shave his head, complete with a disposable razor, operated by kids that weren't old enough to even shave yet. All except for that rat tail we left in the back and bleached out blonde. I'm guessing the tail didn't last too long. Scott, Forrest, Delaney, and Garrett, although it was way too short, thank you for the years you shared our friend and coach with us. He was loved by many.
Thank you, Justin. As we all know, Bryan knew how to have a good time. Wherever he went, as soon as you walked in the room and you heard that laugh, you knew you were in for a good time. But he wasn't all about just being entertained. He was an entertainer himself and a performer. He was the voice of the Huskies. He performed in Barnstormer plays. And he was also a member in a band, which he loved. Here to share some memories of his moments in the band, his fellow band member, Ken Melder.
Hello, everybody. First, I have to say, dang, Justin, you did well. Might be a little tougher, but I think I'll go with it. Just read it theory. Yeah, that was good. Yeah, the music, like I say, one of the things is the sharing of laughter, because it was usually always good times. Actually, bandmate and a friend, I'm going to use interchangeably because the way I really got to know Bryan was playing in our first band. Some of our local yokels, Ron and John and Dennis and I were playing with our new synthesizers and MIDI drums, and we were having what we thought was an awesome time. And I believe it was Ron one time said, "Oh, I think I know a guy that plays drums. You know, can I bring him out?" And so he came out that night for an audition, or actually he just came out to listen to us to see if he even wanted to actually come back. But he did come back, and he brought a drum kit, and the audition was like, well, hell yes, you know, no more MIDI boom chugga. We got a real live drummer. I'll see you. I just work out bringing. I would have lost that spot. But the one thing is, when you play with different people, and sometimes somebody comes in and they have a click up above your talent level, it's always helps out the band, and having a live drummer really kicks it up quick. So we played quite a few gigs, all locals. We did a lot of memories not a problem. But anyway, we played probably through all the different bands we played 5 days, or I can't remember what year that was. And it was still burning the day, Saturday that we were supposed to play. And Ron calls, he goes, well, what do you think? And oh, the show must go on. Let's do it. And if they get the fire out, it's gonna be a hell of a party. So we loaded up the gear in my cousin Benoit's old 70 Econoline van and drove up, and it's just smoky as heck. So okay, they might get it out. Let's set up. And so we set up, did a sound check, and the only people that were there, they were also somebody setting up a beer garden. Bryan and I go, oh, how convenient. So we did a couple songs, did a sound check, and then had a beer or two. And then we step outside and, oh, we gotta go. And it looked like Grass Valley was be burning any time now. So yeah, we took off. But before we left, Bryan volunteered to help come up with me the next day to load up the gear. And he was always impressed with the old Econoline van. And so we loaded it up, and he wanted to drive it. So we took it out to, I guess the word is looky looks. We were going to go check out the fire. And so we were driving around out in the fields east of Bird's Ranch. You never know when a fireman wants a band. You want me to set up over here? Or, you know. So anyway, that was our first band was a Starvation Point, and that's when Jenny was born, and it continued just for a long time. I think if you ask Bryan, he actually like to put that with the rest. I'm not listening now. But and then later, Scott Thompson, a new singer, a new teacher came to school, and was a singer and guitar player, and somebody who played in a band for many years before he came here. He came from Toulouse, and got together with Dennis, Bryan, and I, and we started Loose Gravel. And again, it's when you pick up somebody with talent, you just really, and we really clicked it up with many notches. And we played, I think for like 5 years, 5 or 6 years. But we played many gigs all over. We played in Portland at the Green. We played at Edgefield. We opened for Granada for Lloyd Jones. We were doing well, and it was and it's like everything through here. It was fun, and Bryan was definitely part of the fun. And sometimes you go, not that fun, but it's always a good time. And not just playing music. Bryan liked to go see music live. And I remember many trips going to reggae to Tom Petty. One time he called me and said he wanted to drive up to Gorge, George and see Tom Petty. It was kind of a road trip. And we went up, and he had, I can't remember what the car was, a Mazda 6, some kind of sports car. He had a V6. He probably went too fast up there and back, but we made pretty good time. And the Tom Petty show was just awesome, and they had a lightning storm right behind the stage. It was pretty heavy. And it was one of those other stories where Bryan and I got home, like later that same day. It was, we'll be back soon. And then about 2005, Scott actually moved back and to teach back in Toulouse, and our band kind of went on a hiatus. Dennis Scoggins and Bryan and I, and he used to call us, Bryan used to call us the Three Amigos, would still get together and play in the old house and jam and have a good time. And Petty would sing lots of, Bryan would sing a lot of Tom Petty tunes, like Honeybee, It's Good to Be King, You Wreck Me. A lot of stuff off the Tom Petty's Wildflowers album. I'm with Bryan. I think it's one of Petty's best albums. And it's, you don't really listen to albums very much anymore, but if you have time, just put on Wildflowers. Just take the time and just listen to it. And reminiscing on Bryan, it's a good album. After the hiatus, then came Harvey Stock. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, Harvey Stock. And now we're going to rock it out with the Jaeger bombs. Neighbors on the other side of the river, Zach, Brandon, Todd, they've been playing already for a good while. I don't know, I think Zach had at least 4 Harvey Stock festivals. And I'm sure Bryan probably made most of those. And it was one that Zach pulled out all the stops. These were good festivals. They were a couple days of real good fun. Bryan became a regular Jaeger bombs, and many gigs would follow. I joined actually a couple years later and joined the Good Times. Again, it's Good Times, and it's shared laughter, and it's shared, the music was good. It was just enjoyable. And then Sarah came and started singing with us. Maybe really close about that time. So Sarah's got a great voice. Really should be singing, Sarah. In fact, we won the Evelyn bands at the River Tap in the Dalles, and we were moving up. Oh yeah. Todd and Brandon and Zach and Bryan and Sarah would all sing, and they never put a microphone in front of me. And if they did, they didn't plug it in. And you're welcome. Let me just put you pretty captive right now. So now. But many very, and like I say, fun gigs with the Jaeger bombs, playing at the Riverside Halloweens, the Imperial Outdoor on the patio, Pine Hollow, Ty Valley. It was always fun. There was only one time we played at the Rainbow in Maupin, and we were doing fine. It was still good. The crowd was all right, but there was just one guy. I don't know. He didn't like Bryan. He literally just stood in front of us and looked. But it was the first time that I thought, we're gonna have a fisticuffs thing. It's gonna be. It's okay. But after it did, I don't know how it all really did, but it blew over. We were all good. So like I say, a lot of times when you're playing, there'll be those characters out there. One of the characters I had was my college, which unfortunately is like the branding iron, it's now closed, and it's sad. It's not a very big place, had a small stage, and the people there were rocking. It was a good hopping time. But where we set up, I'm playing the bass guitar. I'm really in the hallway by the toilet. It's right here. And so it's back and forth. But this one night, I'll say a gal, and I'm 60s, at least 70. She's keeping up with everybody on the dance floor. She's just going fast, just having a good time. And we do about 3 quick songs, and we go into a slow dance song. And she just comes right up to me, cuddles up, puts her head on my shoulder, just stayed there the whole time. And she's whispering in my ear, stop, 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 too slow, stop, stop. So I got over and I said, okay boys, let's pick one up now, let's have a little quicker one. And Bryan said, okay, we know who Ken's fan club is. And every time we'd show up, he goes, did you get a hold of your fan club? Is she going to be there? I go, maybe. This page, but again, I just would like to say that the fun and the music and the band part is the same as just friends. And, you know, Bryan. It's the same kind of joy. It's laughter. You're gonna have a good time. You're gonna have good laughter. And I guess it's Righteous Brothers song, rock and roll. If you believe in forever and life is over, it's not just a one-night stand. It's a rock and roll. Sorry. Let's do good. I could have skipped that last page. Anyway, the main line is, you know they got a hell of a band. And, I think with Bryan, not just a hell of a band, they're going to have a fun band. So, rock on.
Thank you, Ken. I think it's already been alluded to today. Bryan was the ultimate sports fanatic. I don't think there is a bigger Beaver fan anywhere you could find. And he'll really be proud this year. The Beavers won the Civil War football game, and we moved on to basketball. The women's basketball team won 2 out of 3 against the Ducks, and the men's basketball team did the same. Then they went on to win the Pac-12 tourney, and then they won yesterday, so go Beavs. When they played their first home baseball game, they said because of COVID-19, the attendance was 0. And I said, oh, that can't be. We know Bryan was there, and he had the best seat in the house. So here to share some of his Beaver experiences with us is his good friend, Tanner Elliott.
Bryan Forrest Peters, Coach. Bryan, Pete, rock star, dad, son, brother, friend. Whichever name you knew Bryan as, one thing resonates with all that knew him is that the guy was sincere and a giant-hearted man. Bryan was the guy that was there. He was a man of stature that made you feel at ease and comfortable. Many of you knew that Bryan was a huge Duck fan. No, I mean it. He loved them so much that he loved his Beavers to beat them anytime they could, didn't matter what sport. He loved every minute of it. I worked for Peters Ranches starting in high school, and I was fortunate enough to not only have a good employer, but more importantly, what came from that was a lifelong friendship. Bryan and I shared the love of our bees. We made several road trips football and baseball games. And of course, solving all the worldly problems along the way. I'll spare you my Chris Foley rendition, Matt Foley rendition. In 2018, Bryan came up with the bright idea that we would arrogantly or courageously load up Delaney and Garrett and head for Utah to watch the Beavers take on Mississippi State. And of course, I had to question that logic. And he had to get into one of his little voices, as you all can imagine exactly what I'm trying to say here, folks. Anyhow, we were lucky enough to beat Mississippi State. Gave us a little extra time as we headed on into Omaha. And as many of you can remember, that championship series had lots of ups and downs and turns, but that's why we love baseball. Watching the Beavers overtake Arkansas was a great memory that we got to share with Laney and Garrett and Bryan. That road trip will forever be etched in my mind. Celebrating with the Peters family, all for the greatest show on dirt. A day like today, Bryan, being the wheat farmer that he is, you can say bring on the rain. But the second one would be, I hope it doesn't rain in Corvallis so they can get that game in, so they can look them coups. On behalf of the Oregon State Beaver baseball team, I'd like to present the family this jersey for his dedication and love of the game. We're going to retire his number. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanner. I think I can maybe see the method behind Bryan's voice of the Huskies as the sun goes away and the wind comes up. He was right on the 50-yard line. He was inside a building and he had a heater. Anyway, as we all know, family means a great deal, and with Bryan, family came first. To share some of the memories of that. Yeah, go.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Bryan's Aunt Kathy. At least I'm his adopted aunt. Because when Bryan married my niece Heather, he started calling me Aunt Kathy as a joke. And I started teasing him back, and I call him Little Bry, and he would just crack up laughing. As the years went on and we both spread out a little more, it got even funnier because when he'd call me Aunt Kathy and I'd call him Little Bry, he'd just crack up. I'm sure you all remember his laugh like I do. When he was really little, about 4 years old, Forrest says he loved going anywhere with his dad. And he'd put on his cowboy boots and go out the door, and one day they went to a store, and the parts man was watching him walk up to the counter and said, "So what's your name, son?" And he puffed out his chest and said, "I buy Pico." Forrest loves that memory. There are so many good ones of Bryan. These are some favorites from his close family and friends who knew they couldn't stand up here without Bryan. His brother Scott. Bryan was always involved with sports in most of my early and then later memories. I believe we started playing Whatacat with our grandpa, Bob Albright, when I was around 4 or 5 years old. This was a way our grandpa showed us how to play baseball when you didn't have enough players. That led to the invention of more games, like playing football over the couches in the basement and hoops, wherever we could tape or wire a basket up to a door or wall. I bet you remember that, Forrest. Then it became more outdoor games, playing baseball or basketball with a hoop on the shop door or in the barn, or our more advanced What-A-Cat that Bryan named Walker Ball. As you know, Bryan was always coming up with new names for everything, like KK for K-Lives. Walker Ball was baseball, but with a small rubber soccer ball. We played it in the corrals when we were working with our 4-H or FFA animals. When we were supposed to be cleaning the shop, the adjustable door with the dunk hoop would sometimes get set to 8 feet. Our one-on-one games weren't really one-on-one, since we played as if we were at the college or pro teams we were following at the time against each other. This made it a lot easier for Bryan to do play-by-play while we were playing. I imagine most of you can hear and picture that. In the early years, get-togethers with our friends would almost always include sports. Football, basketball, or ice hockey with the Martins. Baseball, diving for footballs in Burnett's pool or at the Far West Classic with Burnett's. Track meets at Thompson's, which would sometimes turn into night track meets we called Monster. Jen Burnett Giannotti and Angie Thompson both mentioned Monster in their cards to Forrest. Angie called the game Scare the Pee Out of Ty. Jen said, I have so many good memories of growing up with Bryan as my big brother, sliding down the dirt hill, playing Monster. I could always count on him to be there for me, especially during our years together at OSU. That's another story. It's cold out here. Angie said, Bryan was such an awesome guy. I was thinking back on our crazy times together. I have so many amazing memories. Painting the clubhouse with John Deere green, Caterpillar yellow, and International red. Forrest says Bill Peters wasn't as happy about that as the kids were. Burning potato chips in the kitchen while the adults were dealing with Scott's broken ankle after he fell out of the treehouse. Bryan and Scott watching and reenacting the movie Dreamscape 400 plus times. Dreamscape's a 1984 movie with Dennis Quaid and Kate Capshaw. Do you want to do a reenactment now, Bryan? I mean, for Bryan? No? Okay. I didn't think you would, Scott. Dag's Drive-In recreated at the Ross Place. Track meets at Peters over the cattle yard. I don't know if I should say this. Hiding alcohol in the incinerator at the ranch. Sneaking and drinking Bill Peters' Christmas punch in high school. So many sleepovers and holidays together. Our Seattle trip, we thought they screwed us with the Monte Cristo sandwiches we ordered from room service. We thought they used old French toast because we were kids. And Angie's final memory in the card was teaching me how to drive the Fiesta. Now back to Scott's memories. We had some good times going to Gill Coliseum to see Gary Payton and the Beavs play, and witnessing together our first live Beaver victory in the Civil War in 1987. I have countless memories of going to see Blazer games, Seahawk and Mariner games, before Beaver baseball really took over. I wish I had recorded the call from Omaha after the Beavs beat Arkansas in 2018. Bryan was on cloud 9. The lady said he was so superstitious that he wore the same shirt for the entire 4 days they were there without washing it because, hey, it was working. He didn't want to mess with what works. They call it Mr. Stinky. Bryan stayed connected to baseball by becoming an excellent high school baseball umpire. A crowning achievement was the state tournament he umped behind the plate at That was another call I wish I had recorded. He was thrilled to have had college assigners wanting his information so they could add him to their rosters. He stayed connected to basketball through coaching at Wasco Grade School, and that was the start of the nickname Coach. His coaching career would go on to include some men's softball as well. Those he impacted through his coaching continue to call him Coach to this day. He stayed connected to football by becoming a fantasy fanatic. I remember drafting our first team in person at the casework shop before you could do it electronically and have an unlimited number of teams. Garrett says Bryan had 6. It seemed he was always playing for the championship in at least 2 of the leagues he was part of. His connection to football didn't end there, as he became and remained the voice of the Huskies for nearly a quarter of a century. His love for sports made it easy to follow Delaney and Garrett, who are both excellent athletes. There may have been a time when his overprotective and highly competitive spirit got the best of him, and he called me from outside the gym, where he was asked to stay until the end of that contest. That was once. Most of us know that he was a dedicated father more than he was a fan. Having a team choose to honor you on the back of their football helmet tells you that and a lot more about Bryan. Can you grab the helmet, Garrett? Thanks. Just show him the back. It's got his name on it. It's Goldendale. Delaney says it's just hard to pick a story or a memory when there are so many. His favorite thing to say to me after a game was, "Good game, hon." Or during basketball, he'd be like, "So, the defense could use some work, huh?" Or just smart alecky comments. He came to almost all of our games, no matter where they were, and he was always supportive, even though, like Uncle Scott says, his competitive spirit got him in trouble. Garrett says his dad would tell him that it was a good game no matter how good it was or wasn't. And he would tell me things I could do better. Sunday football and biscuits and gravy are the kids' favorite memories, one of them. He made the best biscuits and gravy, Garrett says. And Delaney says biscuits and gravy every Sunday was a good one, but driving through the wheat fields on the Ranger was pretty fun too. They loved doing that. So, another favorite memory is their Mexico trip in 2015. Garrett liked having massages come to the resort house. That was his big memory. And walking on the beach in the morning. Forrest says Bryan would do a play-by-play of the day they got lost in the Mexico desert. "The Peters family is still missing. They'll find their bleached white bones someday." But Delaney's favorite memory is about their cat. A few years ago, maybe 4, I went to a Little League game and some people happened to have some kittens that they were giving away for free. So I called my dad and I was like, "Hey, so how about we get this cat?" And he goes, "Absolutely not, Delaney Marie, because I'll have to be the one to take care of it." So I kind of pouted for a while, and then, as the game was ending and we were about to leave, Jalen goes, "Hey, let's get those kittens anyway." And I agreed. I walked into our house with this kitten in my arms, and my dad goes, "You didn't." And I was like, "Well, I did." I brought the cat over to him to pet, and he's like, "Get it away from me. You better find a place for it to stay, because it's sure as hell not staying here." So while I was at my mom's house, the cat stayed at the Justices, but only for 2 weeks, because my dad quickly became infatuated with this cat. Some backstory real quick. We never knew the gender until she became pregnant, so we called him Henry at first. But the cat I'm referring to is Catty T. Catterson, the most magnificent cat in the whole world. Although my dad was pissed that I had brought this cat home, I hope that the irony is, the thing he hated the most at first was the last thing in his presence before going to heaven. I hope this can make everyone laugh and smile and imagine how funny my dad would think that is as well. As Forrest said, I was there when he came into the world and was there the day he left, but he had to share it with the cat, Forrest. Forrest remembers when Bill number 2, Bill Makelum, and I were building our house and planning our wedding. I asked Bryan how he felt about all this, and he said, "It's kind of weird to be going to your mom's wedding, but go for it, Mom, he's a good guy." As Jen Burnett says, you raised a compassionate, caring man, Forrest, and the world's a better place. Remember, those we love don't go away. They walk beside us every day. Unseen, unheard, but always near. So loved, still missed, and very dear.
Thank you, Kathy. Before I forget, the family would like to have you sign one of the books. There's one at the bottom of the stairs, one at the top before you go. And to bring them home for us and food. Our ceremony date is Bryan's brother, Scott.
Just want to thank everybody. Obviously, the attendance means a lot to us. All the cards, the texts, the emails, flowers, the help. She's supposed to be going faster. We had some ideas for a song, obviously, with these 3 different bands of what to play. Werewolves of London came to mind. But based on some conversations we've had here today and his love for a certain team, we're going to bring it out with this one.